So our topic is addressing risks from natural hazards from schools, and we're going to talk about two different projects. But let me talk about schools first, because schools are more than just buildings. They're more than just, we tend to think of buildings as all the same. We actually in the code have 4 different occupancy classes. Schools fall in one of 2 depending on how they're used, which is kind of confusing to begin with. But even in that case, schools really are not the same as all the other buildings in occupancy class. Schools house an entire generation of our public, of our nation's population. And the public expects them to be safe. I think they have a higher expectation, in fact, than most other buildings that they walk into. And in fact, I heard one person in one of my projects describe schools are the only buildings other than prisons where the population is mandated to be inside that building. So, and I know my kids think of it that way, so anyway. However, schools are mostly controlled by the government, which tends to unfortunately mean that they're generally older than most buildings, and they're generally not as good at construction as most buildings or other classes of buildings. So, hence our issue of how schools perform in earthquakes and other hazards. 2 earthquakes that kind of were wake-up calls. I want to just touch on the first, obviously, because we're in Long Beach, the 1933 Long Beach earthquake. That earthquake was the first one to really demonstrate how bad URM buildings are, and in particular school buildings. We collapsed over 230 school buildings in that earthquake. Fortunately, school had already been released for the day. It was later in the day, or we would have hundreds of children killed, and this would have been a much bigger issue than it was. Even so, the wake-up call was heard. The state of California passed the Field Act, which required special inspections of school buildings and other requirements for new construction. The other wake-up call that I'm going to point out, I think, is the 2008 Sichuan, China earthquake. This was an earthquake that had over 69,000 casualties, but most of them, unfortunately, were actually school children. There were hundreds of schools that collapsed in the earthquake. There were poor construction, and some of the most riveting images that come out of that earthquake really were the parents of those children protesting to government officials why those schools were so poorly built. And before you think, well, that could never happen here, that was China, let me tell you, given the number of unreinforced masonry school buildings in high seismic areas in this country, this will happen here, unless we do something about it. And with that, I want to talk about 2 projects. The first is the Earthquake Engineering Research Institute School Earthquake Safety Initiative, or SESY. It's a program that was started by EERI, brings together a bunch of experts who are truly committed to creating knowledge and tools to improve school earthquake safety. They leverage their expertise to help communities actually help do the retrofit. There are a series of committees that are actually under that program. You see them there. I'm not going to read them because they're going to be talked about in a minute anyway. FEMA was happy to provide funding for the first 2 years of this initiative, but the agreement was only 2 years, and last year we kicked them out of the nest, and they're flying, sort of, and they're off to a good start, and we hope it continues. So presenting will be Maggie Ortiz-Millan from EERI. She's the Earthquake Program Manager for EERI. So Maggie, thank you very much. Maggie is filling in for Jay Berger, who's, I think, on your agenda. Jay had a family emergency back east, so he had to travel. So Maggie is filling in, and we greatly appreciate your flexibility. Our second project is a FEMA Applied Technology Council project to develop a school safety guide. There were several things that triggered this, and I wanted to take a minute just to touch on these. And this isn't just an earthquake guide, it's all natural hazards. The first was, of course, the ongoing seismic risk of unreinforced masonry school buildings, and the fact that the word is not out there. People don't understand, parents don't understand the hazard those buildings represent. They continue to send their kids to those schools until something really bad happens. Also, in regard to earthquake, there was also confusion on what to do during an earthquake. Obviously, we all drop cover and hold on. Unfortunately, there's other guidance out there that has made its way into the school operations guides. And I'm not going to mention their names, you know what they are, but I continue to get questions, well, which one should we do? Well, there obviously is only one answer to that. But that confusion is out there. We wanted to have a guide that addresses that, hopefully for the last time. Also, tornadoes. We actually have had 2 recent tornadoes that resulted in school fatalities. And there was confusion about there's guidance out there to take best available refuge when you get a tornado warning. Well, what is best available refuge? We had a project to develop that. We want to import that guidance into this document as well so schools know what best available refuge means. But even better than that, we actually had a huge success that we wanted to put in this guide, and that success was FEMA proposed a code change for the 2015 International Building Code that now, for the first time, requires a tornado storm shelter in all new school construction in high wind areas, high tornado wind areas. Drew Herseth, who's here in the audience somewhere, was instrumental in getting that code change passed. Congratulations, Drew. We want to get the word out on that. This guide was one of the best ways to do that. And we also have another success we wanted to brag about, and that is we have our very first school tsunami vertical evacuation refuge being built by the state of Washington, or in the state of Washington by a school district. It's the first one in the United States. They're very prevalent in China or Japan and other countries. But we wanted to get the word out about how schools could be used for that purpose as well. So the objective of the project is to develop a guide for school safety that focuses on what school administrators and staff and operational folks should do before, during, and after an event. How to prepare for the event, what to do during the event, and what do you do after the event. You know, if you have to shelter in place, what requirements do you have for that? If you're having parents come to get kids, how do you arrange that? So that kind of all that material. We've worked with the Department of Education in this process. But the project includes design professionals, emergency managers, school administrators, teachers, concerned parents, and everybody else. That will not be presented by Veronica Sadias. It will instead be presented by Aisha Hortatsu, who is the Director of Projects for the Applied Technology Council. And thank you for your flexibility as well. And with that, I will now turn it over to Maggie. Thank you.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Mike, for the introduction. As Mike said, I'm Mag Ortiz. I'm Program Manager at the Earthquake Engineering Research Institute, filling in for Jay Berger, our Executive Director. And I'm going to be talking about our School Earthquake Safety Initiative, which is focusing on promoting safe buildings for school children. So to start out, to give you a little context, for those of you who don't know, I just want to say a little bit about EERI. EERI is a global nonprofit technical association, so we have 3,000 members, mostly based in the US, but we have a large number of international members, and our mission is really we're dedicated to reducing earthquake risk. And we do that from three standpoints. And the first is to advance the science and practice of earthquake engineering. The second is to improve the understanding of the impacts of earthquakes. And the third is to advocate for comprehensive and realistic measures to reduce earthquake risk. So knowing that about the organization, as I talk a little bit more about the School Safety Initiative, you'll see how that fits into the overall mission of the organization. So to start out with, the School Earthquake Safety Initiative is a mouthful, so it goes by its acronym SESY. So what is SESY? So SESY is most importantly a network of professionals and experts who are coming together to focus their energies on the issue of school earthquake safety. And school earthquake safety is a topic that a lot of people are really passionate about. And so bringing that passion together, and people are really looking for tangible ways to make a difference and bringing their minds together to develop some solutions for the issues under school earthquake safety. So that's what makes up SESY. And the goal of SESY is really to come up with tangible ways of making schools safer for children. And so the vision of the program is to really be a leader in the science, policy, and advocacy for school earthquake safety measures. So to give you an idea of who makes up SESY, currently there are over 100 people involved in the program as of April. And it's really a diverse group. So one of the things about EERI is we're a multidisciplinary organization. So every project we do, we try to bring in different perspectives and people with different experiences into our projects, and we find that's really beneficial. So on these two graphs, you'll see job functions of people who are involved, and there's some researchers, some practitioners, some people from government, some people from schools, some media, so really looking at bringing in a wide variety of stakeholders. And then the second chart there shows you the disciplinary backgrounds of the people involved, and you'll see there's a lot of slices on this pie chart. So we're really looking at bringing together this diverse group to come up with creative solutions to some of the issues in this area. And then one more chart just to show the geographic distribution of the people involved in the program. You can see there are also a lot of slices. Over 10 states are represented in the program, and we also have a fair amount of international individuals who are interested in the project and understanding how they can apply some of what's coming out of SESY internationally. So as Mike said, there are also some subgroups in SESY, and that's really where a lot of the work is being done. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of each of the subcommittees to give you an idea of the things that each of them are doing. So the first subcommittee is the Safety Screening, Inventory, and Evaluation Subcommittee, and that's being chaired by Ken Gettle. And the goal of this subcommittee is really to promote the use of screening to identify risk in schools. So they're focusing on doing case studies and presenting some best practices and being able to show the advantages of using these screening methodologies to identify risk. And then the second subcommittee here is the Code Updating and Improvement Subcommittee, which is being chaired by Rob Jackson. And they're really looking to advocate for code improvements and implementation practices that will increase school earthquake safety. Our third subcommittee is the Classroom Education and Outreach Subcommittee, and it's co-chaired by Thalia Anagnos and Lely Vanden Eind. And it's looking at school earthquake safety from a different approach. And so they're developing some curriculum that can be taken into classrooms and some lesson plans that are really fun. Kids get to build structures and kind of build a shake table and test them, and they're learning about earthquakes, but it's also a mechanism to bring the topic of school earthquake safety into schools. And so this is one of the really active subcommittees, and we had a great pilot running last fall with some grad students in UC Berkeley. They took the lesson plan into a fourth grade class in Oakland, and they had a great time, and it brings in the topic, the kids understand more about earthquakes, and it introduces this topic into schools in a way that's very non-threatening. So there's a lot of interest in this program, and the committee is working on finalizing these lesson plans to work with other groups across the country to be able to take these into more schools. And our final subcommittee here is the Tsunami Mitigation for Schools Subcommittee, and that's currently being led by my colleague Heidi Tremaine at EERI. And they have a little bit narrower focus and looking at schools with a tsunami hazard and being able to connect them with some experts to help build a support system for trying to address those hazards. So as Mike said, the SESY program is fairly new. It's been going on for a couple of years now, and it's kind of a reboot of the previous program that EERI had related to schools, which was the School Earthquake Safety Committee. And the idea was really to get something that was more actionable, something that had tangible results. So there was a planning process, and they really were working hard to identify how we're going to make things happen. And so out of that planning process, there are 4 main goals that are trying to be achieved in 2016. And the first is to outreach to the current people who are already involved in SESY and increase their involvement level. So you saw there are 100 people involved, but varying levels of engagement. So the program is really looking to identify ways that people can get involved, increase their involvement, and make more progress. The second goal is to finalize some of the working products that are coming out of the subcommittees. So the classroom education is working on finalizing their curriculum, finalizing some of these screening case studies that I mentioned, and some other guidance documents that are being worked on by the other subcommittees. And then the third is to increase shakeout involvement. So shakeout is something that's really popular in schools. We've heard about it already in the meeting. And there are a lot of overlapping aspects of the shakeout program and our school earthquake safety initiative. So working to find how we can integrate those two a little bit better is an important step for 2016. And then finally, the fourth one is outreach to stakeholder community. So you saw that pie chart that showed all the different stakeholders that are currently involved in SESY. And in 2016, I think we want to work to increase some of those slices. So if we would look back at that chart, you'd see a lot of engineers are involved in the program, but we really want to make sure we're having good representation from all the stakeholders with an interest in this issue. And I just want to mention a couple of related efforts that aren't directly under the SESY initiative, but have similar goals. And these are state support projects that were funded by FEMA that EERI has managed over the last couple of years. And the first is a series of school assessments that took place in Alaska. And there were two phases. The first phase looked at 7 schools in the Mat-Su district, and the second phase looked at 47 school structures in the Kenai Peninsula. So this is an example of a case study about using screening in schools to identify risk. And actually, that second phase was really timely because there was an earthquake earlier this year, magnitude 7.1 in Niskin, earthquake, and the evaluations that came out of that second phase were able to be used to prioritize inspections after the earthquake. So that was a really nice success to come after that project. And then the second project here is a project we did with the state of Washington, looking at seismic safety assessments of schools. 14 school campuses were evaluated using the ASE 4113 Tier 1, and then a follow-up HAZA study was conducted with a focus on life safety of building occupants and costs of repair and time to recover. And that project is just wrapped up, so if you're interested, there will be a report out soon. So finally, that's kind of all what's new with the SESY initiative. It's a pretty recent program, so there's a lot of, we're building up some speed and we want to keep things moving. There will be some more programs coming out with this fall, some best practices webinars that will be released in the fall. So if you're interested in this topic, I really encourage you. One easy thing you can do is sign up for the mailing list. It's a listserv, and it's really just a great way to get connected with all the people who are interested in school earthquake safety, and to be able to share and learn information related to the topic. And if you're really interested in one of the subcommittees, the chair of the initiative is Barry Welliver. My colleague Heidi Tremaine is the program manager for the project. She's out on maternity leave right now, but if you just contact one of us, we can get you engaged in the program. And if you don't have time to write down the whole URL there, eri.org/schools is easy to remember, and you can find out more information about the initiative. Thanks.
Thanks, Maggie. Hello, I'm the presenter formerly known as Aisha Hortachsu. Now I'll be Veronica Cedillos for a little bit. Unfortunately, she fell ill at the last minute, so I'm here to step in. So if I'm reading the slides a lot more than typical, it's because I'm seeing them for the second time. So Mike, maybe you should pull a microphone close to you. Great. So we can tag team here. So we have a project at the Applied Technology Council. The project is funded by FEMA. It's a 2-year project. We're in year 1.7, so we're getting close to the end. And we're trying to address risks from natural hazards in schools. I'm sure you could hear the enthusiasm in Mike Mahoney's voice when he's introducing this project. I mean, non-ductile concrete buildings are very exciting, but I think when it comes to schools, everybody just really wants to help. So I think this is a project that speaks to a lot of different people, which is the purpose of the project, because we want to develop one document that kind of brings all the good knowledge under one umbrella. Again, as Mike said in his introduction, there's a lot of miscommunication, misinformation out there, so we want to put this document from FEMA that says, this is the right stuff, this is the good stuff, and it's multi-hazard. So we're going to develop a guide that is speaking to natural hazard guidance applicable to multiple natural hazards. And we'll provide guidance on not just buildings, which is what ATC typically focuses on. It's the technical, the structural engineering stuff, but we also want to focus on operational policies and practices, and we'll, of course, can't help but talk about the physical protection of school facility. We thought long and hard at the beginning of this project about who the audience should be, and this is called the core audience, and Veronica really underlined this for me, that this list is the core audience, but of course we really hope that the people who read this, the district administrators, the school administrators, take this document, what they learn from it, and take it to other people. So it's not limited to them, but we are trying very hard to not write like an engineer, but we're trying to write to the district administrators. I think one of the interesting things that came out at one of our meetings was that we have to be able to give them a two-minute executive summary. So, even if we write a big fat document, we want to be able to distill it in a short time so that the very busy district administrator or the legislator can pay attention to this. This is the project organization that we have. It's quite typical, but what I want to highlight here is that we have a very diverse team. Actually, I'm lucky to have Mike Mahoney in the audience. Ines Pierce is the chair of our review panel. She's right there. Bill Holmes is on our project management committee, and Jill Barnes, I saw earlier, she's on our review panel. And just the four people I mentioned have very different backgrounds. Bill Holmes is a structural engineer. Inez is a risk communications person, and Jill Barnes is a emergency manager with the LA School District. So they're examples of people that are on our committee. And our project management committee is led by Barry Welliver, who also happens to be the chair of SESY. So anything school related, we go to Barry. So in the first year of our project, again, we spent a lot of time focusing on figuring out who our core audience should be, who should be on our team, so we can get all these different points of view. But we also focus on literature review, because again, we knew there's a lot of information out there, and we wanted to know them all before we can try to fill the gaps. So we focused our research around these three pillars that were developed under a UNESCO project. So we focused on safe learning facilities, which is again physical protection of a school facility, school disaster management, so the planning, the disaster plans, and education. How do we communicate the risk? How do we educate the children? So we put some sociology graduate students to work, and they found 255 documents to read, and they did a very detailed, thorough job of reading everything and reporting back to us which category these fit in, so we could identify where a lot of the literature is currently at and what is still needed. One of the things we found is that in the US, a lot of the documentation written by US is focusing on safe learning facilities and disaster management. While a lot of the literature that's written for the international community is about risk communication and risk reduction and resilience education. So we thought this was very interesting, that there's definitely a different focus in the US versus international. Again, the primary objective of the literature review was to identify existing resources and gaps, and the picture you see is a document that was developed by FEMA and the Department of Education, and this was a very good find. It's the Guide for Developing High-Quality School Emergency Operations Plans, and it gives a lot of step-by-step information about what should be in your plan. And these are the important things that are captured in there. The literature review has been captured in a state-of-the-art report. We hope to be able to publish that alongside with our final school safety guidance. One interesting thing that we learned in this literature review activity was the types of challenges people kept on listing over and over and again. Number one is easy to guess, cost. So a lot of these documents are aware that something needs to be done, but cost, finding the money to do it was their biggest problem. And stakeholder cooperation, regulatory review, having access to expertise, having the time to do these updates, and people being resistant to change. So these are challenges that we're going to keep on our lenses as we write our documents, so that we can provide useful guidance. Another activity that we've been working on, so we did the literature review, and then we started writing our document. But again, the core audience is, most of them aren't even in this room, they're at the school. So we wanted to field test our draft guidance. So one other thing we did is that we're conducting focus group interviews, giving these groups of 3 to 4 people our draft material to review, and then we interview them on video conference calls and find out what they're thinking, and we're able to tweak our guidance as it goes. So we have reached out to school facilities and emergency managers, and we've reached out to school superintendents, board members, and a principal. We'll continue with our advancing drafts. We'll continue reaching out, and we'll be getting more feedback from them. This is how our draft is standing right now. Again, this project is planning on being completed at the end of September. So what we found also was it's a multi-hazard document, so not everybody is going to want to read material on earthquakes or tornadoes, or at the same time, unless you live in Oklahoma. So what we did is we're trying to be very general and non-hazard specific in the front, And then we're diving deep into the hazard-specific materials in the supplements. So the school safety guide should be completed by the end of September. And thank you.